Good evening, everyone, and welcome to In the Know with Kat Bobineau. Today, my extra special guest. Let me first say, hey, Dr. Tay, that's my co-host. She's joining us, and we
Hey,
love
everyone.
having her. And my extra special guest today is Asante Day, who is a flight instructor, a pilot, a student, loves neuroscience, speaks Mandarin, can go on and on. Just amazing. And then we also have Elizabeth Antoine-Hands, who is an A&P mechanic, which means she works on planes. And she is all about getting more women and people of color going into aviation and mechanics. And this is all that I know personally, but they have so much more to their story. So I want to welcome you guys to the show.
Welcome, you both.
It's so great to be here. I'm so excited.
I'm excited. I'm excited to dive into these stories. It's a lot of things that we don't ever hear about when it comes to professions like these, and especially the representation alone, right? I rarely see individuals that look like myself in these fields doing the things that you both are doing. So I'm going to be learning and excited about this along the way.
So let's start with Asante. What exactly got you into flying? And tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, first off, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Miss Cat. To start off with how I got into aviation, I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in high school. I initially wanted to go to school to be a mechanical engineer, and I got accepted to Arizona State University, class of 2017 graduating, and high school. And when I got to university, I heard all the horror stories and I saw the things with engineering. I said, oh, no, this isn't for me. No, we're not doing this. No. And I said, what do I want to do with my life? And I said, I'm young. I need to explore. I need to travel. And so my mother, she actually gave me what's known as a discovery flight. And a discovery flight is when you go up with an instructor, who the role I currently am now in, and they take us up and they see, if you like flying, here's the controls, go fly the plane. And so my stepfather, he was in the back seat and I was in the front seat, and he was holding on for dear life. I think you might still find handprints if you fly in that plane. But it was a wonderful time. And after that, it sparked a joy in me that was like no other. And I said, when I got to campus, I said, I want to become a pilot. And I noticed that they had an opening for that in the ASU's Polytechnic campus, and I decided to take that path thus far. And that's what sparked my journey to become a pilot. And now for me, it's not only the aspect of giving back and seeing the joy in other people of, becoming a pilot, because in aviation, it's not a career that we say, but it's a passion. That's why we become pilots. And it's the same for me. And so that, and being able to connect with everybody likewise when we're here, this is what I live for. This and the education aspect. There's so many things that I don't know what's in the world. Try to get as much as I can with the time I have here.
I hear that.
Oh, man, that's amazing. Go ahead, Dr.
Before we
Tay.
go to college, I did want to tap into the inner child in you, like back in those childhood days when you had that discovery flight. What exactly was that exciting thing about the experience? Was it just being there, or was it something in particular that you hold on to in that moment?
What I probably held on to at that moment was the first takeoff, being able to what we call rotate, or all you're doing is really just pulling back on the control wheel or the stick and getting off of the ground. And that feeling of just getting, slightly just slammed in your seat, and then you hear the instructor say, push it a little bit forward, that right there, I said, okay, I'm doing the right thing. And so that first feeling of just getting off of the ground was like no other. And I said, I definitely belong in the skies.
I love that. I don't know. Me as a child, I probably would have been like, what am I doing here? Right? Somebody else take the wheel. So I think that's fascinating that you had that experience while young.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I don't want to fly. I wouldn't want to be the pilot. Let me say that. I wouldn't want other people's lives I will fly. I'm actually still kind of terrified of flying because of an incident that happened on a propeller plane in China 20 years ago. I'm still afraid, but it's the fastest way to get somewhere, so I'm gonna do it. But I don't want to be in the driver's seat.
Mm.
And so, Elizabeth, I know that you have also built your own plane, but before we get into that, tell us, how did you get into aviation and mechanics?
So similar kind of thing. I'm gonna latch on to like that immediate visceral joy the first time you get into an airplane. I was very, very lucky. As a young person, my mother, while my brother was still in preschool, she was going around talking to people as she did. And she met a very pleasant fellow who had a gyroplane, which is a type of aircraft where it has a driven propeller and then a spinning propeller like a helicopter, but that propeller isn't powered. So it auto rotates through the air. It's a very peculiar type of machine. They're not very common. But this one was, cherry red and had three on the back, and he was like, "Hey, you want to go flying?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm 11 years old and you have, brought me to a cherry red flying machine. Yeah, we're going to go." And the thing with gyroplanes is when they take off, they kind of hop. So that thing, Asante, that you were talking about, where you get pushed back into your seat a little bit and then suddenly you're off and away. Um, that for me was just absolutely magical, right? And that's, middle school kind of age. And then I get to high school, and I'm like, all right, I'm super amped up. I'm going to go and do all this fun stuff. And I get introduced to the airport manager at St. Carlos Airport, and she's like, "Hey, there's some old guys building an airplane in a hangar. Do you want to go and check it out?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, for sure." I mean, I'm 14 and you told me that there are some people building an airplane in an uninsulated metal box. I have nowhere else I want to be right now. Um, I was very, very lucky. That group kind of took me in under their metaphorical and literal wing, so to speak. Um, and that first airplane got completed, and I finished high school, and I was able to kind of be shepherded along my track because I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to be doing right after I finished high school. And then the summer after I finished high school, COVID happened, and I was like, "Oh, the world's ending. Okay, what are they still teaching people how to do? Well, they still need airplane mechanics. I'm going to go and do that." Um, and then that kind of brings us back up to the present day. But I do want to get back to that singular visceral joy, where it's like, oh yeah, you see it sometimes, and it's very, very exciting to watch happen. Where you watch this kind of glimmer appear in people's eyes whenever they get into an airplane, and it never goes away. It's fantastic.
I love that both of you want to bring that same joy to the next generation of either pilots or those who will be plane mechanics. Like I love that, right? Like I love being able to have that joy for yourself and not just holding on to it, but saying, "Hey, how can I give this to the next person?" I love that.
Yes, and so I know that we met through the Bay Area Urban Eagles, which is a nonprofit out in East Palo Alto teaching young people how to fly. But I want to jump on what Dr. Tay said, which is giving back. And I know, Asante, you as a flight instructor, you're teaching kids all the fly and all that things. Like, what is the age range when it comes to this type of thing, learning to fly?
Mm. No, that's a great question. It's actually in abundance, speculated all over the place. I could say you would think it would be, in one certain age group. And the youngest I have had the pleasure of teaching is 13, or if you wish to count my younger brother, who is 7 years old, he would be the youngest. The oldest I have the pleasure have had the pleasure, of getting their pilot certificate was 56 years old. And so it is all across the board where we get people of all different backgrounds wanting to take to the skies. One of my fellow instructors has somebody that is 72 years old, female, that is going for her pilot's license.
I mean, I ain't mad at that at all. 72, get your life, girl. Just do what you want to do. That like I'm not mad at all. That is amazing.
No, but
Woo.
seriously, I mean, but thinking about the 7 and the 13-year-old, I keep going back to this because, like, as Kat knows, I took my first piloting class. What was it, July of last year? In my 30s. You're talking about a 13-year-old, 7-year-old, and both of your stories where you were kids and just like exploring that so young and not being fearful of it, but walking straight into it. I think that's amazing. It's amazing to hear. One is it, across all ages. This could be something that could be explored as an opportunity for all ages, right? But also that excitement being sparked so early. I still can't wrap my head around it. I know I'm still here in this place, and mentally, I'm just like, how, right? So, I mean, I guess my follow up question for that for both of you are like, was there anything that made it something that you were hesitant about so early on, or something that you were like, did it change your mindset about life and where you wanted to go and how you wanted to do that, based on how you were thinking before versus right after that exciting moment that created that switch for you?
Elizabeth, you go right ahead.
Oh yeah, sure. Um, so yeah, I got diverted away from the pilot track pretty early on, just because there's a medical certification process that I was like, okay, this is the people at the FAA were like, no, 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 and I was like, okay, I'm still gonna figure out a way to be around airplanes because they're great, obviously. Um, but it is interesting. Because obviously it's it can be very intimidating to look at, just because it's like such a massive industry, and oftentimes it gets portrayed in a very kind of narrow way where it's like, okay, you're going to go and be like an airline pilot, and that's the track, and then finding out that there are lots of other options. So it very quickly became like an exciting exploratory kind of situation where it's like, oh, here are all of the different pathways, because this is everywhere there's people, there's aviation, so let me find all of these different tracks that I can go into and explore, and that kind of trumps all of the other stuff that would kind of act as a deterrent, because there's just so much, and there's so much to be learned, and there's so much to be gained. And a big part, I think, of aviation for a lot of people, especially when you're talking about people, getting their pilot's licenses in their 70s and stuff like that, is it is a continuous learning mindset. And that's something that I find very appealing about it, is there's always this kind of pervasive encouraging force where you can be learning more and you can be doing better. And I think that's a pretty massive draw.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you bringing that up because it's something that Dr. Tay and I always talk about, which, when it comes to science per se, with her it's neuroscience, with me it's biology. It's really a big umbrella with all kinds of disciplines that fall under it. And so, speaking of aviation, aviation is an umbrella, and most people would think just being a pilot is the only job you can do. And no, to your point, Elizabeth, there's a plethora of jobs. There's so many things you can do that still falls under aviation. So Asante, how do you feel?
Yes, indeed. I would agree wholeheartedly. From the standpoint of being a pilot, a lot of the things that the public see is the route that Elizabeth mentioned on becoming an airline pilot. You see the captain, you see the first officer, but nonetheless, there are many other fields that the public does not know about. One of those things is being a corporate pilot. When you work for big companies or people that have a lot of money, millionaires, billionaires, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, you name it, you are their personal pilot. One of my friends, not to give out the organization, but actually works in first person hand with the Golden State Warriors and has met some of the players as well, and he is their personal pilot. Some other avenues that I've actually had the pleasure of working with is cargo operations, where I've actually had long haul flights from midnight to 5 in the morning, up and down from the Bay Area to Van Nuys in California, and that has been a pleasure as well to see what flying is like on the opposite side of the time clock that a lot of people don't see. Some of our newer, less experienced pilots also start off with doing parachute operations where you take people up and have the opportunity to go skydiving. Things you see, we actually take care of the surveying. The maps you see when you work with Google or Apple Maps, excuse me, we're the ones that get the photography for that as well. And so there's a lot of different avenues that we do. And even the pleasant side of aviation of giving back or volunteering is we can also do what known as angel flights, where we help with medical assistance when it comes to rushing for that if somebody needs a transplant, or even search and rescue operations where if somebody is lost in the wilderness, they will send pilots to go help and look for those people. And it's actually a plethora of different avenues you can go down. It's just about what do you want with your own life.
Why don't we talk about these things more? Like, you get what I'm saying,
Mhm.
Kat? Because I didn't
Oh
even
yes.
right. I didn't even think about that. A lot of times you see some of these things in movies, but that's it, right? Like we don't talk about these things enough to actually understand. There's so many other options beyond what we think it actually exists. So I love that. Thank you for naming
My
some.
pleasure.
Yes, I mean let me try to stay on the same topic but change it a little bit where we go into Black history. This is Black History Month, right? We don't always hear about and know about African Americans in aviation, and I think this is something we talked about a little bit at that panel that Elizabeth was on with Urban Eagles. And it's like, why are we not seeing people of color, especially Black people, in aviation? We can name a few, you know, but we need to see more. And how do we get you two out there so more people can see what they can do in aviation?
Mm.
Okay, you don't really have to answer that because I know that's a hard question, but I'm just, I'm passionate about getting you guys or getting people like you story out there
Mhm.
because I want to see more kids and kids of color going into these fields.
If, if we need some time, I have two other follow-up questions that could probably lead to
Oh,
that.
I have an answer, but I would like to give the floor to
Okay, good.
Miss Elizabeth if she would like to speak first.
Oh, you can go right on ahead. I'll hop in after. I'm sure you have
Alrighty.
a great answer.
Don't fight for it,
Yeah.
guys.
Alrighty
Absolutely.
now. Well, to start off, you have your main organizations that can assist in getting our stories out. To be actually quite frank, as we are familiar with a local organization, the Bay Area Urban Eagles. That was founded by Mr. Michael Mashek. He has done much for the East Palo Alto community and helping with our youth to get into aviation, and he has done great exposure from a local standpoint. From a national standpoint, there's also another organization that is known as OBAP, or the Organization for Black Aerospace Professionals. I was actually one of the members that founded the charter at Arizona State University. Now, times have changed, but at my time, I actually did help my own local population of getting into aviation, where we helped some people get into air traffic control. We actually helped some people get their airframe and power plant certificate as well. And more so, it was just a blessing to do. But from an organization standpoint, that is one. Another thing that I would also advise some of our listeners to do is to go out to your local airports. You'd actually be surprised that a lot of people think about your airports or your big ones, such as San Francisco or Oakland Airport, if we were to think locally, Los Angeles, you name it, Chicago. But believe it or not, there are actually a lot of hidden gems all around the place. I actually work at one that is in Livermore, California, and here it's a pleasant place where we always have people come and meet. There's a lot of meet and greets, and you'll find a lot of pilots and get well connected with the community that way. And when it comes to our personal stories, we're out there. And I don't think we do enough justice to the smaller airports and the smaller communities that are all around. Now, how to link the bridge? This is something that I would like to speculate with all of you, as I would definitely need to do some more research on. But from that standpoint, those are the two things that I would like to give.
Yeah. I can hop in here. I think a lot of it is about finding community in those spaces. So again, absolutely, if there's if anyone who's listening is interested, go and find any kind of local municipal airports. Sometimes they have these things called airport days, where there's an open kind of section of the airport, and various vendors and or flight schools and or other personnel will be present, and you can show up and ask them questions. And there will be lots of lovely human beings who are very, very interested in aviation and will be extremely happy to engage with you about it. Um, so I highly, highly recommend that. In regards to creating more visibility in kind of the aviation realm, I am going to throw a plug in here for the Patty Gray Smith Fellowship, which is a fellowship for Black students in aerospace more generally, although the air is still part of the aerospace part. Rockets are very exciting, but the air part is still there. We got airplanes still, which is a fantastic fellowship of which I am an alumni, named for Patty Gray Smith, who is an icon and a pioneer as far as Black aerospace in America goes. But the Patty Gray Smith Fellowship and the few other programs like it serve as kind of a haven for creating that kind of community within the aerospace environment. And going back to talking about cultivating that community, it's not common to see people like myself in these kinds of spaces. And that fellowship environment was actually the first time where I was able to walk into a room and say, oh, there's 40 people in here and they all look like me and they're all interested in doing the same thing. And I was 20 years old when that happened. And that was the first time that had ever happened in my life. And it was the most wonderful feeling in the entire world. So we have to exist here, and we have to cultivate more and more and more spaces and show up in them and say, hey, I'm here too. I'm going to show up at this seminar. I'm going to show up at this event. I'm going to show up at this conference, and I'm going to take up space. And this is how we're going to know that, yeah, there are other people here and there's a spot. And if you can see other folks doing what you're doing, then it really does reinforce, oh yeah, no, I'm supposed to be here and we're going to be getting stuff done. And if younger people can be in those environments and they can say, oh yeah, there's someone else that's like me that's here, maybe I can also do that thing. We can keep that ball rolling upward and upward and upward.
I love that. I love that. So I'm glad that you both answered those questions first, because my two kind of just rolls right into what I'm about to go with this. So I do want to ask one, I don't think we really covered this completely, which is like, what journey did you have to take in order to have your certification, degree, or whatever, training, schooling? Can you give us some details about what you had to do to get into the position that you're in? And then, or vice versa, whichever one you want to start with, were there any type of cultural barriers that you had to like look past? Right? I know. And I
Oh
asked
man.
that because, like, even last year when I took my I would call it like a discovery flying class, right? Like when I took it, a lot of my peers and some of my family was like, "This is not what we do as Black people," right? Like, and I get it. I mean, statistically, it's not what we do either, right? But I also have one of those types of personalities where I'm like, while I'm still alive, I'm going to live. And that was one of my things that I wanted to do and cross off the list last year when it came up as an opportunity. So I did. And now there's other people in the family or friends that are like, I want to do it too now, right? So I completely understand that idea, that mindset, and breaking those barriers. So if you could tell us some of the barriers that you broke or you saw, and how you got past those things, as well as just letting us know what your training and schooling looks like in order for you to get into the positions you're in. Anyone that wants to start?
I can go first this time. So as far as being an aircraft mechanic goes, there are kind of three levels of certification. So it's not like your pilot's licenses where you have, multiple different certificates and then type ratings and all that kind of fun stuff. No, you have your airframe certification, your power plant certification, and then after 3 years of holding both of those certificates, you can get your inspection authorization. And as a certification process, very much like being, a pilot, there's kind of two ways of going about it. There is a formal schooling option, and then there is a almost apprenticeship like process. And I did the former because I was in a hurry. So my program consisted of 21 months because the amount of required time to be trained for an A&P mechanic for both ratings is 1,900 hours, which is a considerable chunk of time, I might say. So that took 21 months of continuous training. And then there's a series of, there's 9 total tests at the end that you need to complete in terms of written, spoken, and practical tests to obtain those 2 certifications. And that's not including your inspection authorization. If you were to take the apprenticeship route, which is, I think, a fantastic way to learn, especially because you're getting introduced immediately to the environment in which you're going to be working, that takes 36 months total for your certification. And then at the end, you're able to take these 3 written, 3 spoken, and 3 practical tests. So it's a fairly intensive process just because there's a lot of material to cover. Again, unlike pilots, there's no kind of type certification. So once you're certified, you're able to work on everything from like ultralight helicopters to 787s to fighter jets. It's a pretty broad and expansive range. And then obviously the privileges and responsibilities that come along with that, because you are then responsible for that aircraft, which is why it does take a pretty considerable chunk of time. And on the path for getting certified, it's very interesting. The average age for airframe and power plant mechanics in this country is, I think, over 40. So that's not great. And then the other chunk of that is the number of working aircraft technicians that are women is less than 3%. And that's of the number of certifications held, it's a ridiculously small number. And then the portion of that are, women of color, it's increasingly small. So it's the primary challenge is the kind of hyper visibility in all of these spaces, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, I've walked into this room and everyone here is, a man who's 20 years older and at least half a foot taller than me. So like, what's happening here? And having to show up and prove that, no, I do have, my technical knowledge and I do have experience and I know what I'm doing. And here's, all of my documentation to back myself up. And having to be constantly prepared to engage with another human being that is going to, kind of step on your professional opinion, right? And your conduct. And especially this is true because there is kind of a hierarchical structure within the aviation community when you're engaging, especially with freshly minted pilots, let's say, very, very, very people who are very new to the aviation space. That's another barrier where it's like, oh, really, you're my mechanic and also. And having to engage with that as kind of a routine part of professional life has really been the thing that's at the top of the list, because I can show up and I can have all of this information and I can have all my training, but that still doesn't prepare me for like whatever nonsense people are gonna throw at me at the end of the day.
Right.
Wow. I mean, also as someone who's over 40, I just died a little on the inside when you said that, but that's okay. That's all right. But that's incredible, yet incredibly sad. But I'm glad that you persevere through those types of things. And before Asante, before you go, anyone who is watching, if you have questions or comments, put them in the chat. Let us know so we can ask them on air. But go ahead, Asante. You want to go ahead with yours response?
More than happy to do so. So The process to become a pilot, I'll be more brief with the answers. You could find more of the information in what's known as the Federal Aviation Regulations or Aeronautical Information Manual. You'll see a lot of flight instructors, everybody in aviation refer to this, but you can find more of the information online. But in a general concept, to at least go for the private pilot certificate, well, you are legally allowed to fly a plane by yourself. You can go up in the air, you are the pilot. You need a minimum of 40 hours of experience at this time. Now, most people end up finishing with around 70 to 75 hours, depending on how well versed they are and how adaptable they are to learning to the mechanics, the fundamental knowledge, as well as the practical application of flying an aircraft. Prior to getting your private pilot license, or I should say certificate, as it is a certificate of license, but you will have to go through a couple items, such as getting what's known as a medical certificate. You have to be evaluated from a medical doctor that is approved by the FAA to make sure you're sound body and mind. You will make sure that you have to keep your health up, as well as you will have to have a government issued ID. This could be a driver's license, a passport. You can even train in the United States if you are a foreigner as well, but there's a couple other hoops you'll have to jump through with the TSA. And as well with that, just receive the proper training from a flight instructor as well. So that's just the private level. Now, to go a little further and get your commercial certificate to where you can actually make money as, a pilot now, and to be truth be told, most pilots, when they get their commercial certificate, will not make money as a pilot. You will have to go through more steps, but do not let that take your hopes down. It is a certificate that will help you get there. So the hourly minimum jumps from 40 hours to 250 hours minimum time you need in order to become a commercial pilot. What they look for at this level is more so they know you can fly a plane, but do you have mastery over the aircraft? And that's the big thing with this, and being more well knowledgeable and versed in the education that you've received through your training. And then from this portion, you will go on to doing a lot of different avenues, such as you can receive different ratings, which is known as an instrument rating, which most people at the airlines look for, which is can you legally, or you're legally allowed to fly in clouds. Without this rating, you're actually subjected to not being able to fly commercially with passengers at night, or what we say is about 50 nautical miles from your home. So basically, you could take off from San Francisco, but you're not going to make it to Los Angeles without that rating. So that's a lot of things that kind of sets
Right.
people back from becoming a pilot, or not a pilot, correction, but another hoop or barrier you have to get through. So it's additional training. And instrument training, it's like learning another language. So just something telling listeners to be ready for. And then furthermore from that, you can receive what's known as your certified flight instructor certificate, which is the one that I have, where now you can teach people how to fly aircraft. It's more so the knowledge that you learn at the commercial level, but now it's do you have the ability to teach it? There's no hourly minimum with that, but do you have the ability to teach inside and outside of the aircraft at all times? And so my journey that I did, I went to Arizona State University and I did a partnership program with Airline Transport Pilots Flight School, also known as ATP Flight School. This program, they allowed what's known for a restricted ATP, which is a certificate. ATP in this terms means that you are a licensed airline pilot, for simple terms. And what the minimums allow is normally pilots that wish to go to the airlines need 1,500 hours minimum to go to the airlines. And receiving your
Mhm.
restricted ATP allows you to make it to the airlines as a first officer, i.e., the restricted portion of it. You can only be a first officer for a given amount of time. But it's a minimum of 1,000 hours. So they deducted by 500 hours, which is quite significant. It's more so you're looking at about a year in deduction. And so I got my 4-year bachelor's of science degree, and I did a minor in Mandarin at Arizona State University, while culminating with different organizations, such as I am in a fraternity. I am a brother of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. I started the OBAP, Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals, a chapter at Arizona State University, as well with helping out and assisting in a couple other programs as well on the side. And this process took me about 5 years or so to not only get those clubs and organizations up and running or assisting in that, as well as the minor and the bachelor's as well, and going through my flight training. It was about 5 years. So there was a lot of things, but normally with pilots, if you wish to just do this for fun and you're not wanting to have such a structured background, you can go to a flight school, which is known as Part 61 training that people hear. That's just your general flight school training. It could take people at their own rate that they wish to go. Some people can get it done in The earliest I've seen, which is very rare, and I do not want to dissuade people, but 6 months, it is possible. But 6 months on average, you're looking at 2 years for flight training. But 6 months is for somebody that has no life and they're doing this every single day. So be ready for that. So yes, it's possible. And some of the challenges and hurdles that I went through personally at Arizona State University. Well, first out, I think we had a washout rate for our flight school program. It was around, last time I checked, I believe 82% of people that applied washed out of the program. So it was already tough to deal with. And number two to deal with, or really should be a number one, is going to that flight school day in and day out, sometimes getting up at 4 in the morning to go fly a plane at about 6 in the morning after pre-flight. You have to take care of business. I would be the only African American in that building. And it was quite unfortunate where
Mm.
a lot of my peers were of Caucasian descent, and it was a little bit, I guess you could say, disheartening at the very least to see that I'm the one that's here. One thing
Mhm.
that did lift my spirits were my family that I hold dear to my heart, especially my mother. She was the one that would, push me day in and day out and say, "You got this." And when I felt like I couldn't do it, she would push me more. And as the road trudged on further and further, and I got to working on my commercial certificate, there was a couple other young brothers that would come in and out. And I said, "Oh, this is kind of nice. I'm not the only one anymore." It's like four or five of us, but we were well knit tight, and I actually would start to introduce myself to others that were working on their private pilot certificate, and I would give them little tips of the trade tools and stuff. And that's actually what inspired me to really help in the OBAT section of my training, or section of my time at and university. And so, anyways, things like that. And even so, for my own fraternity, I actually had some of my pro fights, if I may say, that are also airline pilots. One of them specifically, he used to work for Emirates at the time, and he helped me with my instrument rating, or that portion that was, like I said, learning a new language. And that's what I do with the
Right.
airlines all the time. And so, my pro fight, he came back and we would meet on Zoom just like this, and he would assist me at, oh man, 10 at night, 10, 11, and we would just go for, 2, 3 hours. And it was just a good time that he would just give back and help me too. So, like I said, it's far and few, and it definitely was disheartening sometimes to just be the only one there. But I thought to myself and I said, "Hey, this is the aviation world. It's going to get better. And when I meet a brother and I see them, I'm going to try to lift them up the best that I can. I'm going to lift them up to the best of my ability. But until then, I still love aviation for what it is, and we do the best we can."
I love that. And I love that both of you have like a lot of similarities in your story about being surrounded by, even if it was just a few individuals that look like yourself striving towards the same goal, how empowering that is. Because it resonates with me deeply. Now I did hear, Kat, if you don't mind, Max, one more question I'm getting out of you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I
No, go
I
ahead.
did hear both of you kind of touch on, I wouldn't say teamwork, but I guess like the collaborative spirit between the mechanic and the pilot, right? And how sometimes that can elongate your journey in trying to get your certification if you're not able to have a better like, relationship with that individual and so on. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because I think I've never even thought about this, right? Like, and both of you like barely touch, you kind of tiptoed on it for a second, but I just want to hear more about what does that mean? What does that relationship look like?
Yeah, I can hop in here and start because it's kind of an interesting thing, right? Because obviously aircraft as an entity uh, are fairly complex pieces of machinery that have to stay in the air, and there's the amount of upkeep on them is pretty substantial. Just like in the sense that if no one's flying the airplane, I wouldn't have a job to do. If I don't do my job, the airplane isn't flying. uh, so um,
Yeah.
it kind of depends on where you are, but I think it's interesting how much of a disconnect there is between mechanics and pilots a lot of the time. They tend to be fairly separated, especially in the commercial environment, because typically that's not the point of interface. There's a management process that occurs in between your maintenance staff and your pilots, generally speaking. So it's interesting to see in smaller general aviation environments where there is a direct point of interface versus if we zoom out to larger commercial operations where these are often two fully separate populations, even though they're operating on, the exact same piece of equipment, but in fully different contexts. I don't know, Asante, if you want to add anything to that.
Of course, yes, indeed. I also agree that there's a huge disconnect between our mechanics and our pilots as well, where I find, and this is just a personal statement, that a lot of pilots we're generally taught the bare minimum or the surface level knowledge about how an aircraft functions. And this could limit our ability to deduce if we're making the correct decision when it comes to navigating as well as aviating the aircraft. And luckily, one of the things that our flight school that we do is we actually keep an open line of communication with one of our chief mechanics as well. And I've learned so many things from him. For example, one of the biggest things is the pre-flight of the aircraft. A pre-flight of the aircraft is when a pilot does the walk around and to inspect that if there's any damages, chips, stings, or anything that makes the aircraft unacceptable to fly. And there were some things that our mechanic has showed me ways to test that other pilots, when they were teaching me when I was going through training, that I never learned. And I wouldn't have learned things of checking to make sure, hey, for example, how do you know that the wing's not going to fall off? Well, did you ever think about pushing up and down again? And did you hear the crack and the bends over it? Did you listen to that beer canning sound? That's a sound that's known as metal fatigue, which means that your metal is slowly giving away and rotting. It's like, when we, flex and unflex our arms, metal, it can only do that so much. But us, we can do this all day, but metal can't do that. And if you hear just a huge ka-chunk, maybe it's not a good idea to fly that plane. And I've, met a couple people that didn't know that, to be quite frank with you, that are licensed pilots. And things like this are just things that I think it's very beneficial that we keep open lines of communication with our mechanics, because not only are we learning from them, but vice versa, we help with mechanics as well. Especially I want to give on the engineering side. I think the company Piper that work with pilots and well to help mechanics on figuring out this is how it should be set, this is how it should be set, and pilots fly like this. And so you're not dealing with so many nuts and bolts that are super close. So you'll see some pilots that also have their A&P license as well. And they'll say, okay, the plane should be built like this instead of having this nut right next to this wall, and I can't even get to it with, a 10-inch socket or something like that. Point being is that it helps both ways. And from the pilot side, it really does help to learn more about the aircraft when I hear a ding and I don't know what that is.
I will hop in just very, very quickly. You touched on something that is fantastically important, which is the side of aircraft design where they're actually consulting with the people who are operating and having to maintain their aircraft. That's kind of a big deal, as far as at least I think it's a massive deal, because that's my entire impetus for pursuing a formal 4-year degree track. Is there is such a disconnect between the pilots and the mechanics, but also between the pilots, the mechanics, and the engineers who put these airplanes together in ridiculous and impossible to manage ways. I, as a human, only have so many joints in my arm. I have a shoulder, I have an elbow, and I have a wrist, right? And I don't have more of those. So you do have to put fasteners in accessible places. So I am a big fan of any proponent of increased communication between those groups. And I just wanted to highlight that because that's a victory every time it happens.
That is amazing. And I mean, dang, this hour is almost out. We had like 13 more minutes. So I do want to give an opportunity for you guys to say or talk about something that you do outside of aviation. So what is something that that you're into, your hobby or a skill or something that you really enjoy that's outside of aviation?
Elizabeth, would you like to go?
Oh, sure. All right. Yeah. I'm going to struggle with this one because, I go to school. It's like, all right, this is for aerospace engineering. Great. I go to work. Great. This is for airplanes. I go on the weekends. I volunteer. More airplanes. My parents are like, are you going to get another hobby? Are you okay? Is that like, are you good? Yeah. No, I'm very, very invested in painting and visual art. Just because I find that's, it's a hard departure from all of the very kind of rigid technical kind of stuff that I'm engaging with for most of my time. And I think it's important to be able to engage with, visual storytelling as a way to communicate outside of this super rigid box with all of these regulations, and constraints, to where you get to engage as a human being. You've created this thing. Another person can come and look at it, and there's a shared experience that isn't, otherwise bonded by, um, again, the technical rigidity, which we have to have a little bit of a break from, because otherwise it's a little bit too much. So being able to do that and share that with people is really, really fun. um,
You said share it. Where do we
Um,
see it? How do we see these
okay,
paintings?
this is the part where my portfolio website is not a thing that exists right now, and it will exist at some point, but not at the moment because I have been
Okay.
terribly busy. Um, yeah,
Okay.
sorry everyone who was
No, no,
optimistic.
no. Just so you know the type of person that I am. Once you tell me what you would like to do, I will try and light a fire under that, or be like, let me see it. How do I share this? Because I think everyone should win. Okay. So I'm always like, do it. So, okay, I'll keep on it. I have your email. I'll figure out. I'll hit you up in like a month and be like, "Where's
right.
All
those
right.
paintings?"
So to everyone who's listening in, to be continued.
Right. Exactly. All right. What about you,
Well,
Asante?
just like what Miss Elizabeth said, is when you are a member of the, or a part, I should say, a part of the aviation community in general, it does take a lot of your time. To be quite frank with you, as a flight instructor, I work 6 days a week on average, in about 10 to 12 hour shifts. That's not including just the flying, but also the ground portion. So it does eat up a lot of time. But outside of those times when I do find some solace in relaxation, I spend my time reading books. I like reading a lot of nonfiction, and that has actually led to me with. I need to speak with Dr. Tay about neuroscience, and this is
Mhm.
also with when I say about with Miss Cat about even learning about biology a little bit. Where I was actually in studies with one of my students, and we're talking about a subject known as human factors, and in human factors, it talks about the different ways that us as pilots and being human, what things can go wrong, aspects that can go wrong in flying, such as hypoxia, if you can hear about that, which is the lack of oxygen when you're up in
Mhm.
altitude, or even carbon monoxide
Mhm.
poisoning that happens in the aircraft. And I was talking to my student, teaching them about how carbon monoxide poisoning can affect the body, and it led me down a rabbit hole where I wanted to learn more and understand it from a biological standpoint. And so I went home and I started studying about adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, what everybody knows about, and or most what we know about in a general concept about energy. That's human energy. And
Mhm.
so I started learning about how this helps with a muscle contraction, muscle relaxation, and how it affects the lungs and the expression of the lungs, expansion, you could say, and decompression of the lungs. And stuff like that just intrigues me outside of aviation. And on the neuroscience side of things, I've been more so studying about the occipital lobe, or occipital lobe, if I may say, and how that interacts with our eyes, our rods and cones, and how they're connected. And now, even the mere sight of just messing with this occipital lobe can make somebody go blind, and I never would have thought. I was like, this is just interesting stuff in general.
Mhm.
So things like that, from an educational standpoint, I genuinely do enjoy doing. Outside of that, if I want to relax, I'll probably go out and skateboard. I do like skateboarding, but health is important, so we'll keep it to the street, keep it flat, um, you know, and just a lot of traveling, and so that's definitely some things that do keep me more so preoccupied in my time off. That and language learning, but that's a story for another day.
Okay.
Well, yes, because you speak
Mhm.
But
Mandarin,
what can
right?
you tell me?
That is yes. That is a yes.
You you making us
No,
look bad,
no need,
Asante. You made us
no,
look bad. Like
no
You
need.
need to give me time to get my Google Translate up.
I'm like, dang, okay, yeah. So I feel like I should stop being on TikTok and learn a language now, because I am doing my time all wrong, it seems. Okay, before we keep going, I definitely want to do a little shout out for some of the things that you guys had said versus and some of the things that I said. And let me go ahead and share this screen if my computer wants me to. And so the first thing I want to talk about is the Bay Area Urban Eagles. Let me go ahead and put them out there. So, Bay Area Urban Eagles, that's the nonprofit that we spoke about that is in the Bay Area out in East Palo Alto. Check them out at urbaneagles.org to learn more about them. The next one that I definitely want to talk about is the Bay Area Flying Club, right? So that is the club that Asante spoke about, which is the Flight Club and Flight School. So if you're interested in learning more about that in Livermore, oh wait, I'm not even sharing it. Okay, if you want to learn more about that, check them out, bayareaflyingclub.com to learn all about flying. And that's closer to me than East Palo Alto, so maybe one day I'll go there. And the last thing I want to share is what Elizabeth was speaking about, which is the Patty Grace Smith Fellowship. If you want to learn about empowering Black excellence in aerospace, this is pgsfellowship.org for anyone listening to this later on. And no, nobody paid me to share it, but I think it needs to be
Absolutely.
shared. So there we go.
Well, look at the success story of two
All right.
individuals in these programs that knew about these programs. Absolutely. Kat, you did a great job with that. I just want to put that out there. Thank
Seriously.
you for supplying
Thank
the
you. I'm
resources.
trying something new. Trying something new. And go ahead. Oh, that's me talking. I hear myself. If you want to know, let's see. There's another one I want to talk about, which is Dr. Tay. You want to learn more about Hey Dr. Tay? Go to heydrtay.com where we can learn about neuroscience and STEM exposure and diversity, inclusion. And I'm amazed at Dr. Tay because she is always opening new ideas and things to me that I did not know about. And I am always learning. And I can't forget myself.
Absolutely.
Right. So make sure you go to my website, which is katbobino.com, just my name, learn about what I've done in the past. Also, go ahead and buy some books. That's what I'm going to need y'all to do. Buy some children's books about what I wrote for my child. And I also have some STEM kits that are all about medicine. So make sure you check that out. All right. I'm done with all the plugging. I want to say thank you to both of you for giving up your Wednesday evening to share your stories, talk about what you've done. And I also want to give you guys the last word. So, what is something you would want to tell your 7-year-old self about what you've become or what you would want them to know about aviation or just life in general? Yeah, that's all right. Think about it, let it marinate over you. If you don't want to talk to yourself, what would you talk to another 7-year-old? What would you say to them about aviation?
I can hop in here.
Would you
Yeah, go
like
ahead,
to?
Elizabeth.
Um, if
Yeah.
I'm talking to myself, no, we do not become a particle physicist. There's way too much math and they do not get paid well.
Real moments.
But the most important thing, I think, especially because as you know, a young person, there's always this impression that your trajectory has to be very linear, that there's going to be a series of set steps that you're going to have to take to reach your objective. And it does not go that way. And it is so much more interesting when the path is strange and winding and convoluted. And there will be failures, innumerable failures, and your life will be made much, much, much richer for it than it would have been if everything had gone perfectly smoothly. That is my piece of advice: is the world is a strange place and things will go wrong, and it is going to be a-okay because you will learn so much as you work through all of the trials and tribulations that is the life of being a human person on this strange floating rock in space.
I like it. I like it, Asante.
And this would be my advice, not just to my 7-year-old self. I definitely would say that I still have that child at heart, and that 7-year-old is still with inside me to this day. I think we all still have that child inside us all day. So we're holding hand in hand, and this is more so that the both of us, if I were to say, would want to give to all the young aspiring brothers and sisters of tomorrow's world is my story, Elizabeth's story, Dr. Tay's story, Kat's story. These are all different branches that we have chosen for ourselves. And though these stories are inspiring, the biggest thing that I would like to tell everybody is to find your own path. May that be the path in aviation, may that be neuroscience, may that be biology, may that be the medical field, you name it, STEM, who knows what it is. Passion lies out there, seek it, and don't stop. Life is very short. A lot of us know this, especially when you grow up. You'll see time goes by very quickly. But even though that time goes by quick, you should enjoy what you're doing. There will be ups, there will be downs, like Elizabeth has said. But passion, love for ourselves, for our community, for our friends, is what makes the world go round and what makes life life.
See, I love it when younger people, younger than me, inspired me. And both of you guys said very
You
inspiring
know.
things. Dr. Tay, you got
Now,
anything
I
to
think
add?
this is an excellent way to leave off from this in a high and positive spirit with some motivation to our 7-year-old selves and our older selves. I think this is a tremendously great and inspiring show, and I appreciate both of you for being here. We're going to have to talk more and maybe get you up here again. I think, Kat, it may be great to kind of explore aviation on the East Coast. We have the West Coast represented, but I would love to see what East Coaster aviation people would say, and then maybe bring them together so we can get more resources and have that cross interaction and conversation. So, just a few ideas from the Dr. Tay Corner.
Hey, listen, I'm always down. I'm all about telling the stories, sharing stories, and connecting people with
Thank
each
you.
other. So I'm always down for that. I want to say again, thank you guys for giving me your Wednesday. I appreciate everyone who was listening. And I'm gonna give everyone back their Wednesday. And I don't know. I feel like I have to say something inspiring now. And I don't have anything. I mean, but hey, go STEM. Go aviation. All right.